plenary session. My name is Yelena Bogdanova, Alexandra Institute, and this is a great honor to me to present, to introduce you our plenary speaker. Andrea Peto is a professor at the Department of Gender Studies at Central European University, Vienna, Austria, a research affiliate of the CEU Democracy Institute, Budapest, and a Doctor of Science at the Hungarian Academy of Science. Dr. Peto is an internationally sought after public speaker of gender, politics, the Holocaust, and war, and her works have been translated into 25 languages. She has held visiting professors at the universities of Argentina, Canada, Germany, Israel, Serbia, and Sweden. She received numerous awards for her contributions to public life, including the 2018 All-European Academy's Madame de Stael Prize for Cultural Values and the 2022 University of Oslo Human Rights Award. She is a doctor honoris causa of Södertörn University, Stockholm, Sweden, and her recent publications include The Women of the Arrow Cross Party, Invisible Hungarian Perpetrators in the Second World War, and another book, Forgotten Massacre, Budapest, 1944. So this is a great pleasure and great honor to introduce Professor Peto with her lecture, Why Gender is Central to Illiberal Politics. So, please, Andrea.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the invitation. I'm extremely honored to be here. And don't make any conclusions that the gender lecture is the last one in the conference. It is my fault because I could not come earlier because I'm working in a teaching factory, so I cannot get away. But I really appreciate that you stayed at the last keynote for this extremely important conference, and I'm grateful for the technical support what we are getting here. So, first, before I delve in the talk, I would like to thank for all the support you gave. And this is not an empty gesture, because I think that what happened with CEU and what happened with CEU Gender Studies is actually it was a test case, a litmus case, and thank you very much for the support. You signed petitions, you sent in letters, you demonstrated in front of the Hungarian embassy without any impact. And that's also an important lesson, that there are strategies which do not work. And maybe we can think of other strategies, but that will be the second part of the talk. So I wrote this up, so please bear with me, but I made a very simple PowerPoint, not like Brandon is usually doing, and the students wake up and see, oh, that's fantastic. So if you are falling asleep, you will not wake up for my PowerPoints, because they are very simple. I mean, it's not like his. Okay, understanding gender centrality to illiberal politics isn't merely an academic exercise. It is strategically crucial for anyone concerned with defending democracy, democratic values, and democratic institutions. Too often, we are tempted to dismiss gender issues as culture wars or distraction from the real politics of economics, security, or governments. But this dismissal is itself a strategic error. Gender questions are not peripheral skirmishes in some separate cultural battle, but they are fundamental to authoritarian projects themselves. The control of bodies, families, intimate life sits at the very heart of how illiberal movements got into power, consolidate the power, and reimagine society. You cannot effectively counter these movements while simultaneously ceding the certain terrain of gender, family, social reproduction, love, intimacy. So to do so is to surrender ground to that is essential to the entire illiberal political project. There is another reason why gender matters that we ignore at our peril. It functions as an early warning system. when we witness escalating attacks on gender equality, reproductive rights, or LGBTQ plus people, we should not view this as isolated incidents or mere pandering to conservative constituencies. Instead, we must recognize them as indicators, as canaries in the coal mine, signaling broader authoritarian ambitions. What begins with policing of gender often extends to policing of dissent, the dismantling of civil society, and the concentration of power. If we want to defend democracy, we need to understand that its erosion often begins precisely here, in the intimate spaces where gender and power intersect. Why don't you take a seat? Don't stand there. Yeah. Gender is also central in the illiberal policy, as illiberal movements and politics thrive on narratives of crisis, decline, and doom. Gender provides the perfect vehicle for this story. Changes in gender roles, LGBTQI plus rights, reproductive autonomy, these become symbols of civilization under threat. So to understand the centrality of gender, we need to understand, to grasp the illiberal policies is engaged in continuous renegotiation of meanings of gender itself, reshaping these meanings to serve its own agenda. Gender functions here as what we call it, Grzabalska and Kovács, as symbolic glue, a metaphor for a discursive phenomenon that possesses a remarkable capacity to tap into people's feelings of uncertainty about the world around them. In times of rapid change, economic precarity, or political upheaval, people experience profound disorientation. Illiberal movements exploit this uncertainty, directing attention towards societal issues, especially gender, as both explanation and a scapegoat for deeper anxieties. So this makes gender central to the illiberal offer. By providing seemingly clear answers about gender roles, family structure, social order, these movements promise stability in an unstable world. But this offer does more than comfort the anxious. It builds broad alliances across otherwise disparate groups, religious conservatives, economic nationalists, traditionalists, united by a shared investment in restoring or enforcing particular gender order. Through this mobilization, illiberal actors aren't merely responding to social change. They are actively working to establish a new world order, one in which they get to define what is legitimate and acceptable, both in public and in private life. And then here, gender serves as symbolic glue in this new Cold War, which is not that cold anymore. Finally, we have to recognize that illiberal offer in gender is international, not only local and national. What we are witnessing is a transnational knowledge transfer, illiberal movements learning from one another, sharing strategies, rhetoric, and legal frameworks across the border. An attack on gender equality in one country becomes a template for another. This is a coordinated transnational project. That's why gender matters. And it requires a similarly coordinated response. To understand the illiberal project is impossible without including gender, but also without critical investigation of the failures of the post-1989 period. During this time, so what I will do in this talk, I will talk about the different trends researching gender and illiberalism. And then I will focus on three fields: the societal reproduction, the representation of women in politics, and NGOs, which are branded as gendered topics. And then I will conclude, and I will also conclude with a normative section as well. So what to do, right? So During the regime change, the belief in Europe as a prosperous, secure and free was strong among elites and citizens alike. Less than 3 decades later, we saw increasing right-wing contestation of the post-1989 status quo in geopolitical, cultural and economic tenets. These phenomena have been analyzed within the frameworks such as democratic backsliding, right-wing populism, or hybrid regimes. Because a distinctive feature of much of those new right-wing policies has been in direct opposition to the liberal script. Illiberalism is a fussy concept commonly applied to right-wing majoritarian contestation of liberal ideas. Yet, some scholars restrict it to undermining liberal democratic principles. Contestation of liberalism are as much as Eastern European wide as well as global phenomenon. Yet countries vary greatly in their forms and scopes, and these differences often become overlooked by the backsliding literature, experiencing an uninterrupted whole of government transformation. While illiberal parties and actors have diverse orientation on issues like NATO alignment or Russia policy, opposition to gender has been one space where their transnational consensus has been formed, serving as a symbolic glue to create a new illiberal common sense by connecting different actors, diverse issues related to gender and sexuality, and various socio-economic grievances. So in this talk, I'm arguing that the liberal transformation cannot be understood without gender. Surprise, surprise. So let me summarize the key research and the fields recently. One potent body of works comprises analysis of the so-called anti-gender politics, mobilization of ultra-conservative and fundamentalist groups mobilizing against gender equality and sexual democracy. Research explored their different actors, from churches and religious groups to civil society organizations and political parties. After 2022, unfortunately, often ignoring the obvious signs before the Russian invasion of Ukraine, scholarly attention has focused on the anti-genderism of Kremlin's soft power tool, too little, too late. Aiming to polarize societies and weaken their pro-Western allegiance. Scholarship also studied their transnational cooperation, common tactics, and the context-specific differences between them. For instance, the Czech mobilization were profound to be more secular than the Slovak one, reflecting the differing appeal of religion and role of the church in these two societies. Finally, research offered several typology of gender policy backsliding in East Central Europe, noted discursive delegitimization, dismantling policies, undermining implementation, and eroding accountability mechanisms. Another strand of scholarship examined structural factors behind the rise of illiberal gender politics, most potently the failures of neoliberal equality script. Several works analyzed how illiberal actors initially framed themselves as representatives of the ordinary people's socio-economic claims, successfully tapping into public grievances. Exploring European Union equality measures in Poland, for example, Rawlusko suggested that right-wing contestations were partly generated by democratic deficit in the neoliberal technocratic implementation. So let me go to the 3 fields now. One of the factors, so we are now at the social reproduction and demographic pain. One of the most factors behind this discontent with the neoliberal script has been the persistent demographic panic about the extinction of their population. Across the region, similar falling birth rates, high immigration rates, and growing immigration have incited concerns about the breakdown of social capital and translated into support for right-wing populist parties. As showcased across the region means Eastern Europe, the liberal political offer to societies facing demographic decline is the strengthening of the state in the realm responsible for family and social policy, combined with a backlash against liberal equality paradigm and curtailment of public freedoms. Here is something crucial that we cannot afford to overlook. Gender issues serve as entry points to broader authoritarian agenda. This is not coincidental, it is strategic. When movements mobilize around protecting children from so-called gender ideology, or when they position themselves as defenders of traditional values, they are doing far more than advocating for particular social vision. They are building infrastructure, legal, institutional, and discursive, and they are accumulating legitimacy that can be repurposed for other forms of repression. Let's think about what actually happens in these campaigns. Laws are passed that restrict what can be taught in the schools, what healthcare providers can offer, what kinds of families are recognized, what identities can be publicly expressed. And surveillance systems are established, reporting systems are created, professional sanctions are normalized, civil society organizations are defunded or delegitimized. Academic inquiry is constrained. All of this justified in the language of protection, protecting children, protecting families, protecting culture. But here is the critical insight which comes from studying gender and illiberalism. The networks, laws, and norms established to police gender do not simply stay confined to gender. Once you have normalized state intervention into intimate life, once you have legitimized restrictions on bodily autonomy, once you have established that certain ideas are too dangerous to teach or discuss, once you have built the legal and institutional apparatus to enforce these restrictions, all of this can be later redirected. The same mechanism used to suppress LGBTQI+ visibility can be used to silence political opposition. To silence gender studies can be later used to silence the German Association for East European Studies. The same erosion of academic freedom spreads from gender studies to other disciplines that challenge power. Gender, in other words, is where authoritarians test the voters. It's where they learn what they can get away with, where they build their coalitions, and where they can normalize repression. And if we fail to recognize this pattern, if we treat gender as a separate issue rather than as an opening move into a larger game, we find ourselves unprepared when this newly built infrastructure of control turns towards another target. Restricting women's reproductive rights and gender equality has historically been high on the agenda of religious and national conservative actors. However, the emergence of these new ultra-conservative, anti-liberal groups mobilizing against gender and sexual democracy provided this old structure with new symbolic fuel and global networks, actors, and with lots of money. Since 2010, contestation of reproductive rights, same-sex marriage, and the Istanbul Convention proliferated across the globe, achieving significant gains. Limiting reproductive rights has been high on the agenda of these groups and later illiberal actors everywhere, but yet in Poland, stringent anti-abortion laws were passed in 1993 and 2021, a development explained by the limiting of women's movements political opportunity by the alliance of the ruling elites, the church, and the state media. Alongside these purely reactionary tactics, reducing, controlling, surveying, the second part of this illiberal gender offer has been more productive, offering women across state support, albeit without traditionalist, familialist framework. Familialism is a doctrine that puts family at the center of the state policy as a basic bearer of rights, subjugating women's individual self-determination and reproductive rights to a national demographic demand. In Hungary and Poland, its practical application has varied and included each instruments as family benefits, family tax refund, lowering women's retirement age, symbolic re-evaluation of motherhood. The familialist proposal and policies are widely seen as righting the wrongs of the transition and putting care work and socio-economic rights back on the state of agenda. In Hungary, Eva Fodor argued that this is the new anti-gender familialism which led to the care-fair regime, whereby care becomes the preferred venue through which increasingly overburdened women can claim social citizenship rights. The research documented how demographic anxieties in countries facing population decline led to pro-natalist policies that often restricted women's reproductive choices while failing to provide adequate support for these families. Gendered analysis revealed how reproductive policies become increasingly intertwined with nationalist agendas, and declining birth rates were framed as threats to national survival, requiring state intervention in women's fertility decisions, but also on the European Union level. The next field is the politics. Despite its alliances, topics of relationship between illiberal right-wing parties and women's representations remains poorly researched in East Central Europe comparing to Western Europe. In the West, radical right-wing parties were long discussed, the Männerparteien, predominantly supported, represented, and led by men. This claim holds true also in East Central Europe, yet the rise of illiberalism has not only transformed many old conservative parties into radical ones, but also complicated priorly observed gender gap related to support for the radical right, as well as women's declarative and substantial representation. So that's also gender matters. So the first gender gap relates to women's support for radical parties. Oh, sorry, I forgot to move this because I was so enthusiastic. So these were the topics, the social reproduction topics, and this we are in politics. So the first gender gap relates to women's support for the radical right. Research shows that women in Eastern Europe and in West are likely to vote for these parties than men. In Poland and Romania, a huge gender divide emerges with men voting more for the far right and women leaning towards progressive parties. However, this gender gap fluctuates depending on particular issues and has been more commonly observed to close in the case of new illiberal actors. For instance, the two new parties, the PiS in Poland and Fidesz in Hungary, won elections with slightly more female than male voters, retaining women's support whilst mainstreaming extreme and anti-gender ideas. In Romania, similarly, a similar percentage of young men and women supported illiberal right candidate, and also the diaspora, as we know. The second gender gap concerns women's declarative representation in radical right-wing parties. These typically have been fewer women in leadership positions and bring fewer women into parliament. Yet, this depends on a broader national political culture, with Hungary significantly behind the region. Lower representation, notwithstandingly, radical right-wing parties increasingly offer platform for hardline female representatives and leaders. These are the skirmishers. These female figures exercise their agency by strategically embracing traditional roles and anti-feminism and presenting themselves as advocates for authentic women's interests, as also observed in Romania. Scholarship on nationalist movements in particularly suggests that many women join them seeking an alternative emancipation, where agency and equality are pursued in an anti-modernist rather than a progressive liberal framework. The anti-modernist alternative is moving from the centuries-long vocabulary and framework of employment as a site of emancipation to a different field. The third gap relates to women's substantive representation in the different illiberal rights proposals and policies addressing women's interests. In some radical rights parties, like in Bulgaria and Slovakia, female members have functioned mainly as authorities on women's issues, representing women's practical concerns. With the emergence of illiberal anti-gender discourse, gender equality became more widely represented in East Central Europe. Parliamentary discussions, albeit mostly in negative light. Still, the influence of illiberal innovations on party politics has differed, with the relative strengths of liberal Christian democratic parties seen as factor weakening anti-equality developments, for example, in Czechia. Given the centrality of the war on gender to their agenda, scholarship tends to view illiberal parties as actors of backlash. However, other scholars cautioned against such framing, arguing that illiberalism is novel and productive phenomenon that cannot be reduced to the backlash. As such, its political offer combines anti-gender policy with conservative feminist elements, and they may blend pattern of blacksliding, I cannot even pronounce it, blacksliding with policy continuity and even positive change based on pragmatic goals. The third one is the NGOs. One major strand of research examined how illiberal politics transform civil society and the types of resistance that emerge in response. How, after the democratic transition, feminist civil society has taken the form of professional NGOs and that act as service providers or watchdogs. Parallel to this, many women were active in various church-based or nationalist groups that resided on the margins of normative boundaries of the liberal NGO sector. And these groups became appropriated by illiberal politics. When illiberal parties come to power, the two parallel civil societies are effectively switching places concerning access to state support and legitimacy. Scholarship noted how under illiberal governments, feminist NGOs, along with a broader liberal democratic civil society, became object of selective closure of civic space, which limits their access to political arena, resources, and advocacy space. Concomitantly, research pointed to the logic of securitization, whereby NGOs are presented as foreign agents and threats to existential security of the nation. Simultaneously, researchers observed a process of co-optation of already existing conservative organizations through financing and the creation of new government-organized illiberal gongos. These twin processes, reorganizing the civil society, have been theorized in framework of the elite replacement. Researchers also noted different responses of feminist NGOs to this transformation: resignation, resistance, exit, through confrontational tactics and politicization, and resilience through adoptive strategies. Feminist political science also documented emerging forms of resistance that sometimes transcends earlier limitations regarding mass appeal, funding, or language. Much attention has been paid to the Polish Black protest against the abortion ban, which engaged hundreds of thousands of women from outside the feminist circles. Scholars saw them as transforming the Polish and the European women's movement from a smaller and professionalized sector to a mass popular women's mobilization. Similar movements emerged in Hungary and elsewhere, suggesting new possibilities for feminist politics beyond all political subjectivities and the technocratic approach to equality, on the way of reinventing a progressive glue. So, concluding, recent scholarship revealed how gender operates as a crucial dimension of political transition, with women becoming resources for nation building, normative gender roles symbolizing political projects, and women as political actors navigating changing opportunity structures. Gender politics in the region we are studying often narrated as lagging behind, catching up, backsliding from other equality standards. Yet its complexity escapes such a linear metaphors. Instead, scholarship uncovers gender politics as fraught with ambiguity, combining continuity, rollbacks of prior achievements, and positive change. Prior contradictions and unfinished transformations inform today's contestation of liberalism, offering unique insights into liberal gender politics. The first insight, despite differences in regime ideologies, state approaches to women's bodily autonomy and reproductive agency fundamentally viewed women as reproductive resources for shifting state population and labor objectives. The trajectory of reproductive rights thus goes against the transitology story of democratization. The post-1989 democratic governments blocked major progressive reproductive rights reforms, with Poland even banning abortion against popular democratic will. This manufactured, tilted, so-called consensus produced a context in which progressive changes seemed illegitimate and illiberal interventions could present themselves as common sense. Second, examining women's descriptive and substantive political representation across the system explains why political appeals to women to oppose illiberal politics have mostly failed. During state socialism and liberal transformation, women supported political projects both within the regime structures and resistance, creating diverging feminist genealogies. With transformation regenerated certain spaces, emancipatory politics failed elsewhere, making room for a political counter-offer rooted in real gendered grievances. Meanwhile, the association of emancipatory politics with Soviet-imposed ideology worked to delegitimize feminist politics, turned equality into technocratic issues solved by experts and policies, and not by mass politics. This has been also exploited by illiberal framing equality as a top-down imposition. And third, the trajectory of women's organizations and broader associationism reveals the subsequent weakening and strengthening of state executive and surveillance functions. Neoliberal transformations weakened authoritarian control over associationism while pushing the new NGOs into a role of professional watchdogs or service providers, filling in for the withdrawing state. This precarious mix of donor dependency and technocratic detachment made NGOs primary targets for right-wing attacks on so-called gender as a foreign import. Currently, illiberal politics strengthens state power by dismantling these organizations' material base while constructing parallel networks of the politically and ideologically loyal NGOs or Gongos. Despite the diversity of gender and political scholarship, together with integration and redefinition of the topics in the European Union context, certain areas remain painfully underrepresented through this period. One missing reflection concerns the gender politics of defense and security that only received attention in the aftermath of the Russian war in Ukraine. Despite its salience, the gendering of security has rarely been examined, with wartime conscription regulations and women's security representation excluded from the equality indices, and security seldom discussed in regional gender studies literature. However, the realm of defense has been a space of its own gendered transformations. Despite the emancipatory rhetoric, state socialist regimes excluded women from the conscript military. Yet, this exclusion was not problematized from a gender perspective, as dissidents wished to free men from party-controlled armies rather than open them up for women. Gender equality discussions in security only rose with NATO integration requirements. However, because they coincided with the army professionalization and the detachment of soldiering from citizenship, these discussions were largely technocratic, restricted to implementing international norms or anti-discrimination measures, and did not engage broader public. The resurgence of Russian imperialism is pushing the region into another profound transformation, one from post-militarist societies to post-civilian ones that boost military spending, redefining citizenship, and engage the population in a comprehensive defense. Gendered reflection on this transformation is only now beginning to emerge, with its priority making this scholarship largely unprepared, necessary intellectual and political interventions. The normative end. So where does this leave us? If gender is intended central to illiberal politics, if it functions as both as an entry point and the foundation for authoritarian projects, then our response must be equally strategic and equally serious. And to quote Bertolt Brecht, cunning. So, first, we must take gender seriously as a site of political struggle. This means refusing to dismiss it as a distraction from real politics or to dismiss it as mere identity politics. Gender is real politics. It's where power operates, where hierarchies are naturalized, where control is exercised and contested. When we treat as secondary or additional, we already conceded defeat to illiberalism. Second, we need compelling counter-narratives about freedom, family, belonging, narratives that don't cede these powerful concepts to illiberalism. The illiberals has claimed illiberals has claimed ownership over ideas of protection, stability, and community. But these don't inherently belong to any political tradition. We need to articulate our own vision of what families can be, what freedom means, what belonging looks like, visions that are inclusive rather than exclusionary, expansive rather than restrictive, and ultimately more appealing because they are grounded in human dignity rather than control. Third, we must build coalitions that connect the different actors, feminist, LGBTQI+, and democratic movements, because these struggles are fundamentally intertwined. Too often we organize in silos, treating gender equality, LGBTQ+ rights, and democratic governance as separate causes with separate consequences. But illiberal movements understand what we sometimes forget. These battles are interconnected. The same forces threatening one, threatening all. Our coalition must reflect this reality, and the progressive glue needs to be found. Fourth, we have to move out from the ivory tower. Writing is in an understandable language. That was the aim when we actually produced that book, which is called Orbán's Women's Affair. These are the selling points. With a journalist who have been working, we actually wrote a book which we were hoping that even anybody can read and understand on gender politics, because illiberalism is rising globally. It is popular style but meticulously researched. And it's a global phenomenon when Hungary serves as a laboratory, and we are putting this into different context. And it's in an understandable style, and it's trying to fit in this gap that we see an increase in research on anti-gender movements. On the other hand, the impact, the social impact is, let's say, limited, right? And so this is my revenge book, actually. So this is what I thought, if I burn my bra in front of the parliament, that will not really help much. But this book, which we are launching on the 3rd of November in Vienna, this is one of the things I find important. Besides that, of course, I'm feeding the beast. So I'm also publishing in peer-reviewed impact factor journals. Okay. So, and the last point is the international organizations. I'm sorry, I mixed the 2 points. So last but one, the international organizations, except that international organizations who are expected to safeguard democracy, human rights, academic freedom, gender equality, they fail. And the CEU story is actually a good example. So, to a failure of these institutions, like the Fundamental Rights Agency in Vienna, which is on its webpage for a long time advertised the Hungarian family law, saying that this is a best practice, that a marriage is a union of a man and a woman, because they were commissioning the Hungarian country report to the cheapest bidder, and that was actually coming from a state agency. Or the EIGE, which is blacklisting critical gender studies professionals following the complaints from the different governments. And also the Council of Europe, which is commissioning reports on gender equality, and then they are just shelving it. So the international organizations are not doing their job in order to support us. So finally, we must internalize a fundamental truth. Defending gender equality isn't separate from defending democracy. They are the same fight. You cannot have a genuinely democratic society while maintaining hierarchies of gender and sexuality. And you cannot maintain gender equality under authoritarian rule. These commitments stand or fall together. Gender is central to illiberal politics because all visions of how society should be ordered begin with visions of how gender should be ordered. Who gets to decide, who gets to belong, who gets to thrive. If we want to defend pluralistic democracy, we must defend it on its terrain, not as an afterthought, not as a concession to particular constituencies, but as a core commitment. Because it is here, in the politics of gender, that the future of democracy itself is being decided. Thank you.
Thanks a lot for this fascinating presentation. Dear colleagues, guests, friends. So now the floor is open for questions and comments.
Thank you. Aimna Lewy, University of Oxford, classic. The question I wanted to ask was, you talked about this, obviously this dichotomy between democracy and illiberalism. But of course, we see the rise of illiberalism in many democratic actions, right? People vote for illiberal parties. And I wanted to ask, what about the women who vote for illiberal parties? How do you fight that form of illiberalism? Yeah, that's the question.
Yes, let's collect several questions. Yes, there was a question from that side, please. Who has a microphone?
Thank you very much. I'm Miglena Dikova, University of Ghent. I have the following question to play a bit the devil's advocate. Thank you very much for the very interesting presentation and book. Can we imagine the future of gender and gender movements outside liberalism, and how this future would look like? You mentioned several things that give a kind of a partial answer to my question, but if you can elaborate a bit more. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot. Questions? Not yet? Yes, then.
So thank you very much for the two questions. And here is a list of different suggested readings if you are interested to read further. And of course, the women who, I talked extensively, I thought, about why women are voting for the liberal parties. And if you read this chapter I wrote for the Routledge Handbook of Illiberalism, then I'm actually arguing for three reasons of why illiberalism is emerging. One is the failure of the neoliberal offer, right? And I also talked about this in the talk. I'm also talking about illiberalism as a fuzzy concept. I use this term also in the talk, which requires a host ideology. There are different forms of illiberalisms, and in this sense, this kind of fuzzy concept can be used, instrumentalized, appropriated by different political forces. And the third one, which might be a response to your question, is the dark legacy of European modernity. Namely that illiberalism, maybe it was not visible or not present after '89, but it was very much present and well after 1945. So the institutions, the ideas, the concepts, the continuities in families, they were all there, which is based on exclusion, genocide, imperialism, colonialism, forced settlement, forced migration, genocide. So, this is also a part of the European modernity, and it would be really fantastic to think about alternatives and kind of symbolic, new symbolic futures. The problem is that the progressive forces are not really thinking about this, rather listing grievances and felt hurt that there is an alternative now. And this alternative is getting all the support from the voters. So calling them deplorables, how Hillary Clinton called the Trump voters, or when in 2020, in the graduation of CEU, Botstein called Donald Trump a clown in front of 2,000 people. So that really is not helpful, in a sense that it's not, there is no understanding of where do these people come from, what is their trajectory, and what are the consequences. And this kind of fortress mentality, what you see nowadays very often in academia and in universities as well, that we are the good ones and they are the bad ones, and we are, and that really doesn't help, because they have got uncomparable financial resources. So this is not about who is financing the coffee break. The Matthias Corvinus College, which some of you might know from Budapest, which is one of these leading illiberal institutions, just bought a university in Vienna, bought a university in London, bought a university in Brussels. I mean, their budget is twice as much as the whole Hungarian higher education, serving 150,000 students. Let me repeat. So these 11 young men who are smiling on the web page of this institution, wearing very expensive suits, their budget is twice as much as the budget of serving 150,000 students. So this is not about who is financing the coffee break. This is a fundamentally different game. So then the imagination, how this world can be better, is actually crucial. And you are very right that this is the $1 million question. At the same time, the material foundation of this system is changing, and we see that those who have got a vision, the Silicon Valley boys or the fundamentalist revivalists, they have a very clear vision what they want to do. And this is not only about that they have a vision, but they knew where this vision ended in 1945. And that makes it even more tragic, because a vision which is doomed to be exclusionary, which doomed to be leading towards mass expulsion and violence and whatever, and advocating this as a solution, that is, a double betrayal and a double kind of crime. So you are right, there should be a vision, but I see that the spaces which could be sites of this kind of imagination, namely higher education, pretends there is nothing happening. There is, this is a business as usual thing. I mean, I'm sorry, I have to go to teach my class. I missed 2 credits. I mean, where is the copy machine? And, this kind of discussion is not recognizing that the European higher education and the global higher education as such is under massive attack. And this should be and this is not because they don't like higher education, but because they know that how dangerous this place can be. But it is not at the moment.
Yeah. Thanks a lot. We have more questions. I think, yes, we stopped here.
Yes, thank you very much for your presentation. I kind of have 2 questions, so I hope it's not too cheeky to ask both. But the first one relates to what you referred to a few times as maybe neoliberal forms of feminism or technocratic forms of feminism. I was curious how you would think about that in terms of the kinds of coalitions that you recommend that need to be constructed in the future. And part of me is thinking about, like, what kinds of technocratic feminism are you talking about? Are we talking about, like, for example, now that we've just mentioned Hillary Clinton, right? Her comments on Giorgia Meloni, right? Like, oh, it's just good that there's a woman, as though that is not an illiberal, right? The other piece of it was, you make the claim a few times that gender is the starting point for the rollback of more and more other kinds of rights. But I think at least the history in maybe the UK, the United States, Western Europe to some degree, is it started with immigration and questions about race and the relationship between race and social reproduction. And that's now transformed into something that's much more strongly anti-gender. And of course, that process is going to vary a lot. But I was curious, in terms of this idea about coalitions, how do you articulate a relationship with these questions about race and ethnicity at the same time with gender, without having one, I don't know, overshadow the other? Right? How do we hold them together? I'm curious about your thoughts on that in the context of coalitions.
Please introduce yourself.
Oh, sorry, Bharat Ganesh. I'm based at University of Amsterdam.
Thank you. And we have a couple of more questions. So please deliver the microphone.
Good evening. Sorry. Thank you very much for your presentation. My name is Yulia Trishonok, Alexandria Institute. I'm sorry if my question will be difficult or controversial, but
Trust me, I can do it.
but I'm interested. What are his thoughts on how to what kind of policy should be introduced by liberal societies to know that maybe goes beyond just inclusivity and diversity, or because you see sometimes anti-liberal actors, political actors, and traditionalists, conservatives accuse social liberals, Marxist liberals of extremism, and how to maintain this inclusivity in case that it doesn't include the whole society.
Thank you. I think there was another question.
Why don't I take this?
Okay, then.
You know, the
Two
shyness
questions.
stops.
Yeah, 2 questions and then answers. So please.
Yeah, good. So thanks a lot. There is a big literature about neoliberal feminism. So, and of course, if you are going to a policy conference, you have lectures about gender mainstreaming, gender budgeting. I mean, and that is on the one hand really alienating. On the other hand, I would keep each and every achievement which had been achieved through this past 20, 30 years via this neoliberalized movement, because that's what we have. And also, if we let it go, then we are there out without any institutional structure, without any legal support, and without any kind of international support. So no matter that there are lots of very critical points about the existing gender equality mechanisms inside the European Union. And I also mentioned 3 horrible cases, I have to say, where I was somehow also involved, and I felt the pain here that these institutions are not doing what they should be doing, but they are compliant to the different illiberal governments. That's what we have. And I'm very pragmatic in this point. Use what you have and try to subvert it. And you can ask, how can I subvert the Council of Europe? I'm telling you, I am subverting it now, because we made a report and they just shelved it. We won the bid to write the report and they shelved it, and we had to sign an agreement not to tell it to anybody. So I'm not telling anything about this, because then I signed the NDA. But I'm telling you, it's not easy, because they are owning your work and they don't let you to use that work, and they don't use the work they actually commissioned after a very competitive bid. So, and that sounds like an alibi activity of an institution for me, but still, it's important it's there, because through that work, I met very interesting colleagues, and also I had the opportunity to give a talk in Strasbourg. I talked to different government representatives who were in the coffee break, were, whispering into my ear that this is my government. Oh, that's horrible, but I need my salary. But so, and that kind of context and that kind of conversations actually really crucial. Yes. And I understand your criticism in your voice that I said several times that gender is decreasing. And partly because very often it is not recognized, the attacks on gender, by those who are working in the field of anti-racism or, in other fields. And because usually these attacks on gender professionals or gender academia, this is often remaining under the radar. But this is one response to your question. But there is another one, namely that I I think, I pointed out in the talk, that it really depends on the context. It depends on the context. It depends on the context what kind of frameworks and what kind of fights are happening. And if you look at, of course, the context I know the most, which is Hungary, gender is gone. Ukraine is in. So, but basically they are using very much the same narrative toolkits, the same visual imaginary which they first used against migrants. And so first there was the gender, then there were the migrants, and now we have got the Ukrainians. And this is exactly the same narrative framework. And there is also good news that they are not very smart. They are using exactly the same toolkit, and they don't have any original ideas. What they have is a new modus operandi, which is without shame. So, yeah. As far as what the liberal governments can do better, I mean, lots of things. Lots of things they can do better, and I hope that there will be a think tank or an oligarch or a company or one of these German washing machine foundations which are actually offering some money on thinking about this, because this is the $1 million question, to improve what we have and to make it functional. Yeah.
Yeah, more questions? Yes, that side.
Hello there. My name's Isaac Steinmeier. I'm here with the Alexandria Institute. My question is pretty core to the release of your writing, and I feel like this goes hand in hand with your statement that an attack on gender is as well kind of significant and shows a ability to attack other areas as well. So my key question to you is a little bit more academic in nature, which is just within your writing and within your entire process, how did you kind of find the dichotomy between writing for both the academic community as well as writing for the overall general public? And as well, what do you feel like academics can do as a whole to kind of allow for a greater focus of ensuring that the writing doesn't just stay within the academic community, but as well goes far beyond?
Thank you for this question. Really, really thank you, because there are lots of PhD students and young scholars here, and I just would like to encourage you to think outside the box. And of course, you can say that, you know, I have to feed the beast. I have to publish, I don't know how many articles in a Q1 journal, otherwise I will not get whatever I want to get. So academia now, this neoliberalized academia, is set up to somehow diminish and to control your creativity and also your outreach. And this is very slowly changing. I don't know if you are following the European Commission's different desperate and slightly invisible attempts to make science more accessible, the Open Science Initiative. So there are lots of different attempts up, top, down to make this, to change this. But I mean, I would be very reluctant to say what others should be doing, but I can share with you what I am doing and what I'm advising my PhD students to do. So what I'm doing is I have to feed the beast, right? So, I mean, there is no way that, you know, I can get away with writing books like this without writing academic books as well. But this academic language feeds into this particularly popular writing. And what I do is that I'm, if I publish a peer-reviewed Q1 impact 1.5 article, then I actually translate it to a popular post, or I put it on my Substack, or I put it on Conversations, or I try to pitch it somewhere else. So, and that of course say, I don't have the time, I have to do this, I have to do that. But it actually helps you to learn this skill of transforming a certain knowledge to another language. And maybe you have recognized that I think I'm a good speaker, but this is not something what I was born with, but something I learned. And I can tell you the secret when I learned this, that we were campaigning in 2002, and I was going around in Hungary talking about gender equality. You can imagine that was a challenge. But I learned how to translate this to, let's say, 15 people sitting in a pub after 8 hours of work, and to try to get their attention and to explain that this really matters to you. This influences your life. And this is the skill what you are actually not taught. And I strongly recommend you to find those people who can actually help you to learn these skills. Because academia and academic work is interesting and fun. And that is something which is totally gone in the previous years. And if you go to, talking to people in the conference, coffee breaks, everybody said tired, depressed, and not having funding. And this is not good. It's not good because that actually feeds into the illiberal narrative. And they know that that's the way how first they attract people by the liberals. And if you ask the question, for example, why there is no resistance in Hungary? In Hungary, the privatization of the higher education system happened in 2 weeks. 2 weeks. So if you think in your country it cannot happen, let me tell you, it can happen in 2 weeks. And then immediately the salaries were increased 2 to 3 times. Do you see resistance? No, you don't. Am I in a position to say you should resist? No, I am not. But this is the way how this system operates. So, having said that, if it's not on the agenda or the curriculum of the program, you graduated, that's not an accident, because the academic training is not meant to produce public intellectuals, but professional experts who are working in a teaching factory, as I said at the beginning. And if you want to move out from this factory, unfortunately, you have to invest energy and time. And what you don't have is energy and time. So you have to do it at the moment when it seems impossible. But you have to invest this, because 5 or 10 years from now, you will be looking into the mirror and you would say, boo, I messed it up. What am I doing here? And if you want to avoid that, I strongly recommend you to start with a diary, start with a Substack, and then, it's not like, I have got 5 more subscribers. It is not about this kind of neoliberal consumption, but this is also about you doing a meaningful work. And universities still can afford it, and to have people who are doing this work. And I'm very much a fan of universities and university structures, and this is not an accident that in each and every country, university structures are under attack. And if you read the Project 2025, I don't know who has read that, it's really obvious that the universities will be divided into 2 different distinctive sections. One, the elite place where there is humanities and social sciences. This is, very much the elite thing. And then the rest will be a technocratic skill thing. So, and I haven't even mentioned AI. So if you want to work against the grain, do it, because nobody will do it. And the universities are still spaces to do it. And I also can tell you what I do. I run a wine club at CEU, because the new, I don't know how many of you have been in the new campus of CEU in Vienna. It's horrible. There is not a simple space where we can have lunch together or meet with the faculty. So I'm inviting colleagues and friends to have a wine club. I'm a sommelier. This is my plan B. If everything collapses, I will be working in a restaurant. But I'm inviting people with a bottle of wine and with stories. And we are discussing those stories. So, and this is a way of how, we are not talking about work, we are not talking about things, but we are talking about wine and stories. So, be creative, innovative, and you have got resources. For example, I have an office. I don't know if you still have an office, but if you have an office, organize there something. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Petot. This discussion was even more revolutionary than we expected.
You see, the academia is boring, right? You have to have this discussion.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, colleagues, I think we are close to conclusion of our conference, and I would like to thank again Professor Petot for brilliant presentation and even more brilliant discussion. Yes, and now we are going to concluding part of our conference. So I invite Director of Alexandria Institute, Marco Kangaspuro, for concluding remarks.
So, dear colleagues, it's nice to give a last, during this last session, concluding session, to start it and to thank you all of the good and productive work in this conference. I think after André Petot, the speaking here is not so easy, I would say. But she made part of the spirit of this conference what we need to discuss when we are speaking about extremism and to situational part of it and what it's where we are living at the moment and in what conditions and what are our challenges. I think that this conference has succeeded in it quite well. The discussions on extremism have been fascinating. I have attended several workshops, panels, and listening you and your excellent presentations, fascinating presentations, which have been exploring various dimensions of democracy, liberalism, illiberalism, authoritarianism, and so forth. The participants, you all have been very engaging, deliberate, academically rigorous presentations, and you have fostered a constructive atmosphere for dialogue. That is what we need. And need to continue this. We need to continue this. I refer again to Andrea that although the universities have several pressures around us in several dimensions, our strength is, of course, our capacity, intellectual capacity, and ability to analyze and discuss and to make conclusions, right analysis on the society. And it's not an easy thing, but it's our task, it's our work, and let's concentrate to it. So thank you very much from my side to this conference, and although others are inviting you to the next conference, from my side I hope to see as many as possible of you attending after 1 year again to Alexandria Conference and continuing these discussions and the work. But I want to give a floor and the word to Katalin Miklosi. She has done a great work and a big work with the organization committee, and I guess that Katalin will also introduce the organization committee, whole committee. But let's give a big hand to the whole committee and Katalin's work who have made able to. And I want also thank and hope that you all thank our trainees and interns who have been with us during this conference, and without them we could not survive, as we know. So thank you. Katalin, please.
See, it has been, after 3 very intensive, very long technology. after these 3 days, I think Max Weber would be proud of us. We invited 6 wonderful keynotes to hear and share the top-notch research, and we are very honored and happy that they actually accepted our invitation. So I think nothing describes better what is our conference about is the data, what we have. So we have had 46 panels, 12 roundtables, and as you can see, actually what was the most popular topic was extremist movements, far right. That we have 50 papers out of 207. So next most liked subject was culture war and the change of institutions under extremism. And third was gender. As you can see, actually, this is significant data because we have had scholars from 35 countries and from 4 continents. So this is an indicator, fair to say at least, an indicator that what are the main trends in studying extremism around the globe. So without much ado, I would like to thank you for coming to Helsinki, even in October and in this weather. And I would like to invite you back. But first and foremost, thank you for the vivid, sometimes very heated discussions. But this is exactly what can tackle extremism and survive the freedom of exchanging thought and the freedom of academia in the end. So before I pass the torch to Vladimir Gelman, who will introduce the next Alexander Institute topic and theme, I would like to, on my side as well, call the team, the organizing team here to thank you all for this very difficult journey that we started a year ago. So please come forward, and I ask you to give them a big applause, particularly the students. Come on. Yes, please. Thank you for all. And now it's time, I think, to present the next Alexander Conference topic.
Dear colleagues, friends, guests, it's a big pleasure for me to introduce the topic of our next Alexandria Conference. It will be 25th in the row Jubilee Conference, and the title is Mapping Security in Central and Eastern Europe and Eurasia, Fault Lines and Front Lines. In the second quarter of the 21st century, we live in an increasingly insecure world. Many global challenges, ranging from the rising inequality to climate change, contribute to proliferation of conflicts and pose major risks to the international security infrastructure. Russia's invasion to Ukraine in February 2022 has turned into a protracted major war which threatens European security and has led to a remarkable transformation of European and global defense. And ongoing global turmoil aggravates insecurity with devastating consequences for societies, individuals, and regions. The 25th Alexandria Conference will address these issues by analyzing responses to challenges of insecurity in Central and Eastern Europe and Eurasia. We invite interdisciplinary research at the levels of states and societies in the region and beyond. And in particular, the conference will focus on the sources and mechanisms of resilience of countries, communities, and individuals in the face of these challenges. This conference marks 30 years since establishment of the Alexandria Institute in 1996, and it will be the 25th Alexandria Conference organized annually since 2001, bringing together scholars and experts in Russian, East European, and Eurasian studies. This conference will be organized by the Alexandria Institute of the University of Helsinki as a part of the EU-funded Centerpiece project in cooperation with our partners in Masaryk University in Brno, Czech Republic, and Peace Research Institute Oslo in Norway. The annual conference call will be announced in mid-February 2026 with a proposed deadline for submission of applications by May 2026, and the dates for the next conference set up already from 21st to 23rd of October 2026. We are really looking forward to seeing you in Helsinki in a year from now. Please stay tuned and be back to our conference in 2026. Thank you.
Please welcome our musical performance given by Kolhoosi Orkesteri.
We are Kolhoosi Orkesteri. All of us are students from University of Helsinki doing Slavic, Balkan, or Baltic languages. Congratulations
conference.